So welcome everyone, and I'm very happy to see so many students here today. So we have with us Shivendra Vikram Singh, and he's pursuing his PhD from Benares Hindu University. And his topic of PhD is very obviously very interesting, and for a lot of students, I know this is a very interesting topic to learn about. So he's working on philosophy of consciousness, problem of consciousness, and mind-body problem. And and apart from his philosophical endeavor, he is also a poet. And I'm very glad. If time permits, I'd also like to, if time really permits, if you can hear one of his own poem, that would be great. And he has presented his work in Kanpur Literary Festival and IISc Bangalore as well. So welcome, Shivendra. Thank you for giving us time today and being with us today. So please keep your, just a request, keep yourself muted as the lecture is on, and we can have discussion session after Shivendra finishes his lecture. So over to you, Shivendra. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Kalpita. Let me just share my screen and just tell me when it's visible. So, okay.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, so let's begin. So the topic of today's talk would be mind-body problem, its dimensions and complexity. Before we move any further, let me put forward a brief outline of the talk. First, we'll try to have a simple formulation of the problem. Then we'll try to see that what are the questions that arise from the problem, what have been the traditional solutions. Also, we'll try to look at some thought experiments, some philosophical thought experiments that have been posited as challenges towards those traditional solutions, and how the sciences, multidisciplinary sciences, actually converge on this single issue, and thereby we'll try to look at what is the actual complexity out there of this particular issue in the real world, and what are the issues with the scientific explanation. And lastly, I would argue for a need of a verifiable integrated model of consciousness. So let's begin. So this is a basic formulation of the problem put forward by Keith Campbell. What is the mind-body problem? He posits this formulation in the form of an inconsistent tetrad. An inconsistent tetrad is when you have four propositions and they cannot be consistently maintained together. So the propositions are as follows. Well, the mind is a non-physical thing and your body is a physical thing. They somehow seem to interact, but by distinction or by definition, mind and non-physical things cannot interact. So what are the questions that arise from it? So this mind-body problem is not just one problem, it's actually a set of problems. I've tried to draw out the issues into three sets of questions. The first is the ontological question, that what are these states actually? What are the mental states and the brain states or the physical states? And are they entirely distinct, or is one subset of the other? The other set of question is the causal question. How does mind influence the body? Or does mind influence the body? Or body influences the mind? Or they somehow both interact? If so, what is that actual mechanism with which they interact? And the final set of question is the question of consciousness. Why does this interaction have this subjective experience, what we philosophers call as phenomenal consciousness? What is the nature of this experience, and how is it related to the brain and mind? So mind-body theories can basically be categorized into two types, and there can be subtypes. The first type is dualism. We'll be discussing two forms of dualism, particularly the substance dualism and the property dualism. And then you have the bonus theories. And again, they are divided into two kinds, the physicalist theories and the anti-physicalist theories. I have voluntarily used the word anti-physicalism, and we'll discuss about it later. So, substance dualism. It basically posits that mind and body are two separate entities. But what are the distinctions? As Descartes would put it, body is res extensa, That is to say, body is physical, it occupies space, it has spatial parts, it has spatial location. You can imagine of Al Pacino having a specific spatial location and parts that extend in his space, hands, leg, face, ears, etc. Other set of distinction is that mind is res cogitans. It is the non-physical thinking substance. It's non-spatial. You can ask yourself if the idea of Al Pacino is at the top of your mind or bottom left, or try to be personal and ask yourself if you're happy with the center left of your mind or the bottom right of your mind, or where exactly is this pain of breakup or heartbreak or the feelings of love. Saying that your particular pain or your particular feeling or your particular mental state resides in some physical parts won't help. It won't solve the issue. Why? Because you have this phenomena of phantom limbs where amputees feel pain in parts of their body they do not have. And this is actually V.S. Ramchandran's line of work, who works in intervention with mirror therapy. You can have a look at it later. The other set of distinction is about this concept of aboutness, or as the philosophical term is intentionality. Your thoughts are always about something, but not all the contents of those thoughts have a spatial location. Hence, intentionality is not purely physical. You can ask yourself if Al Pacino, the thought of Al Pacino or Al Pacino himself, has a spatial location as of today. I guess he has. But the 200 feet Hulk and Fenrir from Ragnarok, they do not have an extension. There are no 200 feet Hulk out there. There is no 1,000 feet Fenrir out there. Also, these mental states have phenomenal properties associated with them. What philosophers like to call or use the term qualia. For example, like the taste of burger, the taste of candy, or the sweetness of music, etc. How do we know the bodies? Well, we know the bodies through senses, but we know that senses can be deceiving. As in the case of the rope snake illusion, the Pegasus, there's a distinction over here too. In the case of rope snake illusion, at least there is a locus, there is an adhisthana of the illusion, that is the material rope itself. But Pegasus, there are no unicorns with wings out there. How do we know the mind? Mind is always immediately known, and hence the maxim, dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. No one ever doubts that he exists till he exists. Same for all states of existence, waking, dreaming, sleeping. Despite nulla cogitatio, despite no cogitation, you do not doubt that it was you who went to sleep, or it was you who actually slept well. So what are the arguments? The first set of argument is the modal argument. It was basically put forward by Descartes, and he would say that, well, I can have a clear and distinct idea of my mind existing without any physical thing existing. Whatever, I can form a clear and distinct idea of happening is something that can possibly happen. If it is possible for something to exist apart from the other, they cannot be one and the same thing. There must be two distinct entities, and hence my mind is distinct from my physical body. Other argument, this is in some sense a Platonic argument, and this, as it's called, the argument from essence. So I know, or everyone knows by his experience or understands that his mind is indivisible by its very nature or as its very essence. But your body is divisible into parts like hands, legs, etc. as its very essence. Therefore, mind is completely different from the body. Argument from the indiscernibility of identicals. This law of indiscernibility of identical was put forward by Leibniz, and he says that if X and Y have all their properties in common, they are one and the same. If not, they are not. So my mind has at least one property that is being known with certainty that no physical thing has. So my mind is not a physical thing because it has at least one property that no physical thing has. And same, this Leibniz, he did a thought experiment way back during his times, and it's called the Mill argument. Now you can imagine of your brain being a windmill, and just enlarge it in proportions. Now enter into your brain just as you would enter a windmill. Inside, you'll find all sorts of mechanics going into on. And he basically says that perception is not explicable in terms of mechanical reason. If you enter your brain, you'll find synapses, neurotransmitters, and all those electrical and electrochemical activity, but there is nothing there to explain a single perception. And this argument can be extrapolated to the problem of consciousness as well. And this actually is the hard problem of consciousness, as David Chalmers calls it, and still stands today. Apart from this, there's an explanatory gap, says Descartes. We use minds to understand and produce language. How those faculties of comprehension and understanding and producing actually could be related to a physical system. Well, at his time, Descartes didn't know that machines, say 500 years later, could actually produce language and even poetry. But that comprehension part is still elusive. So what he said was that an explanatory gap should mean that there is a substantial gap. Then you have this other form of dualism, known as property dualism, and it just posits that there is just one substance out there with two different kind of properties, really the mental and the physical properties. Let's understand this with an example. Here's a famous painting by Vincent van Gogh. It's called Almond Blossoms. So this painting in itself is a physical object, oil on canvas, but there are aesthetic properties to it. And you cannot pinpoint those aesthetic properties anywhere in particular. However, if you tamper with the painting, drop color or tear it, those aesthetic properties will be affected. Yet we cannot pinpoint them anywhere in particular. So these aesthetic properties, they are dependent on the physical object, in this case, the painting, but they are not identical with them. So a basic formulation of property dualism, it's just one person, just one physical substance, two different properties, physical properties, mental properties, and the mental properties, they are not reducible to the physical properties. And there is a little variety of it, what is termed as epiphenomenalism. And that basically says your mental properties are not reducible, and yet these mental properties do not affect the body. So this is a thought experiment to prove this point, philosophical zombie. Well, a philosophical zombie is someone who seems like a normal human, but does not have a conscious experience or sense experience of qualia. He can have all the physical state, all the physical apparatus that can be same, but none of the mental states. So here's the argument that, well, such a being, zombie, is conceivable. And if it is conceivable, it is possible for such a being to exist. Hence, qualia and the physical properties, they are distinct properties. So qualia is not physical property. There was this other thought experiment done by Frank Jackson, and he asked us to imagine of Mary, who is a scientist studying color vision, but due to chance of fate or luck, she investigates the same from a black and white room. She investigates color from a black and white room using black and white computer monitor, black and white books, but she's a brilliant scientist and she knows every physicality there is to know about color vision. Imagine one day Mary leaves her room. Will she learn anything new? Well, some guys feel yes. So the argument is basically what's called as the knowledge argument. It says that, well, Mary knows everything physical there is to know about color vision before watching color. But when she watches a color, say red, she gains something, she gains some facts about color vision, which was not there previously in her knowledge base. So there are non-physical facts concerning human color vision, and hence physicalism is false. Again, this was put forward by Thomas Nagel, and he basically asks us that what is it like to be a bat? We may know everything physiological there is to know about a bat. We can even try to replicate a bat in our labs, but that inner subjective experience of being a bat itself, that still is elusive. We don't know that. Hence, mental properties are not physical properties. Let's try to look at the problems with these varieties of dualism. So The first problem is, how do the mind and body interact? What's the locus of this interaction, and how is it related to the brain? Well, Descartes in his days had a solution, which, if we see now, it was a random solution, but he gave their arguments about it that, well, they interact. The pineal gland, in nowadays, this is kind of deemed as folk science or folk philosophy, and vastly this idea has been dropped. Other set of problem is the pairing problem. How is my mind attached to my body and not your body? How does my mind cause things to happen to my body and from my body? Remember, we talked about a variety of property dualism, epiphenomenalism. The property dualist does not believe this. Epiphenomenalist would not believe that mental properties have any causal influence on the physical, which I think is phenomenologically absurd, because that would mean that your will to have a glass of water or attend this talk or watch the new Spider-Man movie has nothing to do with you actually doing it. There is a philosophical term for this problem, but this problem is actually came from the physics side. So in physics, you have this law of conservation of mass and energy. So this law of conservation says that within a closed system, the net mass and energy stays conserved with any gradation in time. Now, imagine human body is a closed physical system and mind is not within the body. It cannot have any effect on the body. If the energy inside the body is not used, then the mass and energy are either not conserved or the system is not a closed one. Even if this mind was somehow inside the body and still be non-physical, then to bring an effect, a causal effect on the physical body, it would have to use physical energy, and mind by definition is non-physical. The physical cannot extend to anything non-physical, and this, as philosophers call it, causal closure of the physical problem. Ex nihilo nihil fit. Nothing can come from nothing. Since the time you're conceived in your mother's womb, there is nothing non-physical out there. You know the whole story. There might be some gaps, but it's widely known. Then why should one believe that something non-physical gets up added on the way? If so, when? Then you have this other sort of theory, which is basically called physicalism. And it argues that there are no non-physical substances out there, and hence at a stroke, to solve the problem of interaction. Physical particles, fields of forces, they can interact with each other, and it's perfectly fine. There's no problem. But how is the mind physical? Well, one answer that came at the turn of the last century, it was behaviorism. That, well, your mind is behavior. There were various varieties of behaviorism. One of them said that mental states can be known or said in terms of verbal and observable behavior. Other version of behaviorism, particularly the methodological behaviorists, they say that mental states cannot be observed and hence they should be inferred from behavior. And so the training as to how one should behave, that should be the proper aim of sciences. And you have this behaviorist wave of Pavlov, Skinner, Watson, who try to develop this theories of stimulus and response and operant conditioning, etc. And in experiments, experimentally tested conditions, they showed that how we behave, think, and respond can be changed with the perfect amount of conditioning. And this actually marked the departure of psychology from philosophy. Again, the biggest issue with behaviorism was qualia. It provides no insight into our inner world of experience. You feel sad and you know it. You do not have to look someone, or you do not have to look at yourself in a mirror. You know that you are sad. Or if you're happy, you know that you are happy. And if behavior were all there is to a mental state, then what would explain behavior is your disposition to behave in a certain way. And this is basically circular reasoning. It's a tautology. Again, behaviorism does not provide any good account of cognition and the language acquisition faculties. And this was basically the Skinner-Chomsky debate. Skinner published his first paper and then turned it into a book, Verbal Behavior. And Chomsky in 1957 or 58 came with a review of the same. And the gist of the debate is Humans are not idiots. We all have innate structures. And why do I call this the debate of the century, of the past century? Because it actually started the epigenetics debate, which was about nature and nurture. So Skinner tried to explain verbal and non-verbal behavior and language acquisition in terms of association and reinforcement theory of behavior. What's this theory? Well, you ask your mom, Mom, I want a cookie. Your mom says, well, I'll give you a cookie, but only if you utter the word cookie. You say, cookie. And there you have it. Your mom gives you the cookie. Now, the association between the word and the cookie is reinforced with this reward, that is the cookie. And with this, there was fair amount of experimental data and crazy theories like the Pigeon project. You can have a look at it online afterwards. And just to show that what was the actual success of this theory. But then Chomsky came with his review of verbal behavior, and he said that this Skinner's theory, it cannot explain the poverty of stimulus theory. So what is this poverty of stimulus theory? It basically says that there is not much information in the environment alone to account for the complexity of language. Similarly, for biological systems, there is nothing in your biology that tells us how you learn to walk or the way you walk. There is a particular way how everyone walks. So Chomsky came up with his idea of universal grammar, and he said that there must be an innate system within us that can expand and organize upon this poverty of stimulus. Though there was no evidence at that time, but he had a theory. And what did he say? Well, he said that even without the explicit instruction, everyone will learn at least one language. The socioeconomics in that language acquisition, they do not matter. And similar stages of language acquisition are seen worldwide. It's a worldwide phenomenon, to say the least. It might be universal as well, we don't know, but yeah. And though they didn't have much evidence at that time, but this point was taken very seriously, and that actually started the whole cognitive science realm. Again, then you have compulsive offenders. I mean, we as academics take the liberty to talk about it casually, but it's a terrible thing for people suffering from it. For example, kleptomaniacs or people suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, they exhibit normal behavior and yet they lack the normal qualia. And by that time, you had neurosciences kicking in, and it was fairly evident, particularly starting from the lesion studies of Phineas Gage, that damage to a part of the brain can alter your behavior. And by that time, during the 60s, it was fairly shown that drugs can alter your behavior. And this was actually the start or the advent of what was called pharmacology in treating mental issues. So you have this other physicalist theory, that is the mind-body identity theory. And this actually started with tools that came in from physics. And these two, EEG, electroencephalography, and magnetic resonance imaging, these are the tools widely used to study brain. EEG is a temporal measure, while MRI is a spatial measure of the brain. So what does it say? Well, just as your gene is just deoxyribonucleic acid, your mental states are your brain states, and pain is just C fiber excitation. Again, at a single stroke, this solved the problem of interaction. Since mind is brain is physical, there is no problem for a physical entity to interact with the physical. But there were again issues. The first issue was this multiple realizability. Specific type of mental states or processes can be realized by different types of physical structures. So you can have pain even in octopus, dog, or dolphin, or all kinds of creatures out there. But pain is C fiber excitation. This identity is contingent. It's not necessary. It can be realized in a different organism, or say even a Martian, using a different set of physical structures, say Z fiber excitation. So it could have been otherwise in some possible world. But identities, as it turns out, are always necessary. An unmarried man will always be a bachelor. Your pain will always be pain, but C fiber excitation is not necessary, and hence the identity must be false. And we conclude that, well, mind is not brain. Still, no account of qualia. And it was with Saul Kripke's paper naming it necessary. And though the whole proof came later in, but the idea was again dropped. So you had other set of theory that came in with the advance of computers and all these intelligent machines. The idea of functionalism, and functionalism basically says that your mental states are actually computational states or functional states. Pain in that sense is also not a brain state, it's a functional state. Such states, they are not made of matter, but actually functionality. How? Let's have a look. Imagine I ask you to concoct the number 50 using any mathematical operation you like. There are an infinite number of ways you can do it. So the number 50 can be multiply realized. So what they said was that what governs the experience is the software, not the hardware. We all have the same hardware, but the information processing manual, the software makes the difference. Now you can make presentation using all these above softwares, PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides. How that is done or how that is realized depends on the software, not the laptop device. Even on, say, a MacBook, you can run PowerPoint or Google Slides. So again, this the basic issue that still stands today. This was put forward by John Searle. This was again a thought experiment, and it's called the Chinese room experiment. Well, you can imagine yourself to be a room and be replaced for a computer, and we can have 2 slots in the wall, and inside a person is placed with a rule book, a kind of information processing manual, using which the person inside can shuffle symbols. So the person inside gets an input, a Chinese input, and using the rule book, the information processing manual, he shuffles symbols. And in turn, he can make the person on the other side to think that, well, the person inside knows Chinese, but the truth is that the person inside does not have the quality of knowing Chinese. He does not understand the word of Chinese. Though the conclusion of this argument have been extrapolated, but what John Searle was trying to say, that mind is not just syntactic processing of a particular algorithm. You can have qualia, but that is not enough. Also, the hardware-software analogy is wrong. Why is it wrong? You have this feedback loops. Hardware can actually alter the software. Exercise, smile often, have a healthy diet. These things have been experimentally shown to affect your mental states. And these are actually the basis of interventions in therapy like yoga or cognitive behavioral therapy, which have been considerably shown in experimental conditions. They have been shown to alter your mental processes and even alter the brain circuitry. All this said and done, where are we? Perhaps in a black hole, because nothing seems to come out of physicalist theories. No physicalist theory explains even the simplest of experience, like the taste of candy or vanilla or banana or the kind of experience you have when you listen to music. So where is it that I come in? What's my tractable research venture? The first thing that I do is I work on the meta problem. What is this meta problem, or what is this going meta? Well, I try to move one level up and look what the challenges with any particular theory of consciousness, or for that matter, even cognition or perception. Where is the actual issue in the explanation of that particular theory? And that helps me figure out actually that what kind of theory do we need to explain that particular phenomenon, say consciousness, and where the fault with the current theory is. Other set of thing that I do is fusion philosophy. And my research mainly focuses on fusion philosophy here. So what's my endeavor doing this? What is it that I do in fusion philosophy? Well, I try to map Indian theories of mind and consciousness to our current understanding of the mind-body problem. I basically look for insights, arguments, thoughts, wisdom, those things in the Indian philosophical system to understand the issue. Why go through all this pain? What is it that I intend to do? Well, I want to develop an integrated theory of phenomenal consciousness, a verifiable integrated theory that can be experimentally tested to explain qualia or the phenomenal consciousness. What's the implication of it? Well, one implication, as I said, that we could, in practice, in principle at least, have conscious machines someday. It's easier said, harder done, but in principle, I think it's possible. What's my hypothesis? Well, consciousness is fundamental. Though, in the Western sense of the term, you might call it panpsychism, but if you look at the Indian wisdom, what they call is Advait, that there is no difference between the mind and matter and all those things. So I think that is a better term. Also, the phenomenal world might be a simulation, but not the kind of simulation you see in movies like Matrix, or you see, you have in the arguments of Nick Bostrom, who wrote his paper, Are We Living in a Simulated Reality? This simulation has to be on a universal level, on a global level. And also, if all is consciousness, we could in principle have P consciousness, say in silicon. So what are the insights I'm talking about? And also, what are the challenges that come along with those insights? Because to be true, a simple overlap won't work. We need to test out many ideas, and maybe amongst 1,000, 10,000, a single one may work, and maybe not even that. So, but why pursue this? Well, first thing, there is a fair amount of conceptual clarity in our Indian systems. This following shlok is from Digdrishya Vivek, and it basically says, Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Driktad Drishyam Drikatu Manasam Drishadhivittasya Sakshi Drigevna tu Drishyate. So you can see that there are clear distinctions in this shlok. So what this shlok basically says is that the form is perceived, and the I is its perceiver. There is a distinction between the I, the perceiver of the form, and the form itself. Then the I is perceived and the mind is its perceiver. So again, there's a clear distinction between the sense organ and the mind itself. Your sense organs are not your mind. The mind with its modifications, so the term is vritti, as the Advaitins call it, is perceived, and the witness, the sakshi, is verily the perceiver. But this sakshi, this witness, is not perceived by any other. So Indian systems provide a better understanding of the concept involved. Mind is subtle matter. It has a quadripartite structure. Manas, buddhi, chit, ahankar. And you might have recognized that over the course of this whole thing, I've been using consciousness and mind quite interchangeably, replaceable for both. But Indian systems did draw out a clear distinction, and mind is not manas. Manas is the proper term for mind would be antahkaran, the internal cognitive instrument. And manas is actually something that does the sankalpa vikalpa. Buddhi is something that does the volition. Ahankar is I, this sense of I, and it is distinct from consciousness. And your chit is your memory. And you have an operative definition also over there. Consciousness is defined as pure non-dual awareness. Another shlok from the same text, Nodeti nastame tesha na vridhyam yati na swayam vibhatathyani bhasayet sadhanam vina. This can be deemed as a panpsychist position, but again, we do not have a panpsychism, we have a non-dualism in our Indian system. And so this shlok basically says that the consciousness, it does not rise, it does not set, it does not increase, it does not suffer decay, it's self-luminous and illumines everything else without any other aid. What's the challenge? Well, I think the biggest challenge here is that how is mind subtle matter? Is it computation, or is it some other form of physics we don't know, or is it something? Is it something that cannot be formulated using our current language, our current understanding of the language? I don't have any answer. Other insight. This is from a paper by Stuart Hamroff, who works with Roger Penrose, the 2019, I guess, Nobel laureate in physics. The name of this paper is How Quantum Brain Biology Can Rescue Free Will, Conscious Free Will. It was presented in Frontiers of Integrated Neuroscience and Volume 6. Let me read it out to you. The Buddhist writings even quantify the frequency of conscious movements. For example, the Sarvastivadins describe 64 lakh 80,000 movements in 24 hours, an average of one movement per 13.3 millisecond, that is 75 hertz. And some Chinese Buddhism has one thought per 20 millisecond, that is 50 hertz, both in the gamma synchrony range. And this long range gamma synchrony in the brain is the best measurable neural correlate of consciousness. So these Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, they have this theory, and that is actually one amongst the many empirical quantum theories that's going on. And they have actually three testable, verifiable propositions about it. And as they say, 7 of them have been proved. There's still a debate about it, but I think this insight is it's fantastic. And forget about the black hole image. The physicalist insight actually makes this whole problem interesting. I mean, it does not have to be desperation, but the question is why any of your phenomenal experience has to be correlated with any brain activity. Why is it so? And I think the Buddhist insight can have clues about how this quantitative data of this neural correlate of consciousness can actually be qualitative. Again, this is from the Purvamimamsa school, particularly the Prabhakar school. Prabhakar had this theory of simultaneous revelation of knower, known, and knowledge. So he basically says that each of your cognition or experience is an integrated phenomena. It's streamlined. It's not that you know oneself at one instance, say T1, you know the object at T2, and then you have the knowledge of seeing the object at T3. Each cognition is an integrated, streamlined phenomena. Again, we have cognitive models even in our Indian system. For example, the Nyaya cognitive model, like you have a cognitive model of perception in neuropsychology, which basically says that you take information from all your sense modalities, say your ears and your visual field, that information, that sensory information, with some kind of Fourier transformation, changes and converts all those external stimulus into brain electrochemical activity, and they grow into your brain, and there they are compared with existing memory maps. And every 400 milliseconds, you have this frame of reality to you presented to your conscious mind. And some would say that that's all there is to consciousness actually. That whole story popping up every 400 milliseconds, that is your consciousness. And also, I'd like to point out a very pertinent issue as to why a simple attribution or a plain overlap can't work. You know, in the 60s, they tried to deduce this or to try to formulate this Nyaya inference model in the language of first order predicate logic. By the 70s, the whole idea was dropped. There were some issues with it. If we get time, we'll try to discuss it. Again, though it sounds pop science, but this is actually serious work, meditation research. Experiential non-dual states of consciousness are possible, and it is not just me saying this, but some brilliant people out there. Let me just discuss two names: Susan Blackmore, who believes in this illusionism theory, and you have Ayon Maharaja, who works in Advait Vedanta. They both say that, well, non-dual states of consciousness, they are possible. But again, Susan Blackmore would say that, well, it's an illusion. Advait Vedantin, Ayon Maharaja, he would say that, well, that's the only phenomena. I can discuss my experience later, but the scientific clue in this is that this meditation, it's particularly correlated with higher prefrontal cortex activity, the front part of your brain. So the biggest challenge, I think, are two dogmas. Let me put forward with a simple example. Collapse of the wave function. So the physicalists would say that there is no miracle in their explanation, and this is actually the miracle. Before the wave function collapse, it can be a wave, and you cannot actually determine its location. But after the wave function collapses, you have a fair position. But before that, what happens? We don't know. They say it's a complete randomness, and there are at least 15 to 20 known interpretations of this. But if you give a physicalist this much, you can have all your fantastic things like lasers, MRI, computers, quantum computers, or even atom bombs. But the other side of it is the Indian dogma. This lack of explanation is used to boost ego, present a narrative using just those information which suit that particular narrative. People with no knowledge of mathematics and physics can say complete absurd things. I'm sorry to say this, but the Harappan drainage system, that's not going to solve our current hygiene issues. So what is it all worth for? I mean, academia is obviously a humble venture, but life, I think, is its own goal. But that does not mean that if we don't have an answer, we cannot exploit the dichotomy. But to do what exactly? So this is a famous film, and that's Dead Poet Society, and it basically says that, well, poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are the things we live for. But how can this whole information knowledge, this whole knowledge base can be used, and to do what? Let's have a look. Let's have a look. This is actually a famous visual art by one of my favorite contemporary art groups, Troika, based in UK. This art piece is called Squaring the Circle. So you can use this dichotomy to create visual illusions, like you had the simple duck-rabbit illusion. So you can use this information to build something like an art piece, a contemporary art piece. Also, you have this music. Zihale miski makuntaga ful duraye naina banaye batiyan. Now this couplet by Amir Khusro, it's at least 700 years old and at least 100 known famous renditions. And why are those 100 renditions actually? I think because these lyrics is multiply realizable. Similarly, in psychology, you have liminal studies which work on the principle of just noticeable difference. You can use that kind of actual knowledge to weave songs like we do today to create mashup or even ads. For example, the Cadbury ad, the whole concept was taken from the 90s ad, but put forward in the today's ad, and still you get a gist. Your mind has this property of weaving around an experience, a whole narrative. Also, you can use this to create fantastic poetry. For example, this is a lyrics by Gulzar. हमने देखी है उन आंखों की महकती खुशबू, हाथ से छू के इसे रिश्तों का इल्जाम न दो. What it basically means is that I have seen those fragrance eyes, do not touch it and taint with name. Well, the lyrics is absurd. I mean, eyes don't have a smell and you cannot touch a smell. But even then, the power of your mind can weave an aesthetic experience. And for me, a good lyrics is one that is multiply realizable. You can hear it when you are happy, or when you are sad, or when you feel spiritual. And that's basically the point of the Sufi lyricist. Also, you can use this whole knowledge system to make PPTs, that is to say, make better content, educational or otherwise. And this basically debunks the whole sensory modality learning. Well, people say that I'm a good visual learner. I learn good when I write, or I learn good when I hear things. But truth be said, it has been experimentally shown that you learn the best that when all your senses are engaged simultaneously. That's when you focus most. So all this said and done, I must say the journey is a long one and the goal too big for a single person. So I invite you all you fresh minds, to explore the problem with me. Maybe some of you down the line have answers that I don't have actually right now, and all those philosophical debates haven't been yet to produce. So, audentes fortuna juvat, tibi gracias ago pro presencia vestra. Fortune favors the brave. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Shivendra, for this. It's a very complex debate, and a lot of thought experiment, lot of minds have been involved to solve this debate. Mind and body both have been involved to solve this debate. I hope students will engage with it. And
this is actually This is actually the School of Interwoven Arts and Sciences. So I thought that it would be nice for all those students to actually feel the dimensions and complexity of it, and how data and information and people from various different disciplines converge on this single issue, and how students and we as individuals can actually use this problem. I mean, it does not have to exactly stay just as an academic venture.
Sure. Okay. I would ask if you have any question, you can use the raise hand feature and ask directly, or you can write or type out your question in the chat box as well.
Sorry, my throat was getting a bit dry. I have a bit throat infection, so I had to constantly take some coffee along with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see. I think everyone.
Kalpita, I just wanted if you give me an opportunity to ask
Sure.
about what is being usually called as the hard problem of consciousness. Would you just simply state for the benefit of our students that what is that hard problem of consciousness?
Well, with the advance of neurosciences, we have a fair amount of data as to how brain actually works. There is neurochemical, electrochemical firing, and you have all those neurotransmitters and synapses and all those going on. But not even if you have all that picture, you cannot explain even the simplest of your qualia, even the simplest of your experience. And so David Chambers basically says that using just this brain phenomena that's going on, you cannot explain this behavior. This is actually the explanatory gap, or how that brain activity actually translates into your phenomenal experience that you're having right now. So that's basically a gist of the heart problem.
Is it possible to say, I'm just using a very simple language, to say that let's say somebody cuts open my skull and looks at the brain. You have all kinds of scientific this thing to say, let's say I'm in a state of utter distress, and there are scientists who are really checking out what is happening in my brain when I have utter physical distress, or I have an accident, or I'm feeling ecstatic, and people are looking at the brain changes or what is happening in the brain itself. Is it fair to say that what we know in the current state of science, in the neuroscience, is largely correlation, in the sense that if you make a catalog of brain states and your emotional state, it still doesn't say that there's no causal way of, you can say correlation in the sense scientific data or some kind of inductive science would say that, look, whenever people raise hand, there's something happening in the brain, or somebody is ecstatic. In 100,000 cases, there is something happening in the brain. You can say that. You can do an inductive, you can do a kind of catalog of those changes, but it still doesn't solve the problem, because it still doesn't say what it means, as you say, the entire subjective dimension of consciousness. What does it mean for me or you or Kalpita or Sumitra to feel happy or ecstatic? Or
I get your point.
Am I stating the problem? Am I stating the problem correctly?
I get your issue. If you allow me some time, it will take some time actually. I can say something.
No, what I'm just asking you, Shivendra, not to explain. I'm saying that is it a real statement, correct statement of the problem, in the sense that I'm not asking you to do anything.
This
is another way of posing the problem, that really you can have a lot of correlation, but it still doesn't explain it.
Yeah.
It doesn't say what it means to be happy.
See, the philosophical problem is that it's correlation, and correlation is not identity. Saying that correlation is identity would mean that just because you are there on a train station, the train arrived. But train did not arrive because you were on the train station. It arrived because it was its time, or maybe it got delayed. So that's the philosophical problem with it. And also, if you allow me, I'll try to discuss two neurological experiments. You can ask this question: if you can cut free will. Ask this question: if you can cut free will, and well, it was done. A person who had this split brain thing we call in this neuroscience. So what happened was he had this split brain. A rod went somehow through his head, and well, he was shown some pictures like keyring, and he was shown this picture, and then he was given a set of objects in front of him. Now, one part of his brain didn't work. Still, he grabbed a ring, and then when asked that why did you grab this ring, what kind of ring, with some fair amount of training, the next item that he picked was a key. So, but he didn't know why did he pick a key. He gave some explanation as to why he picked up a key, but then it was false. So there's again this problem of free will, that can it be done, or does it exist? Also, there have been experiments, for example, from the Max Planck Institute, where it was shown that you can exercise free will even in your sleep. If you think that I'm going to have this, I'm going to do this while I dream. People have shown that it is actually done. But the problem is, I show you some images and just record the neurons firing. Okay, and what's supposed to happen is that those images should pop up in your brain. Now, what was seen, that the similar set of neurons they fired, but what the subjective experience was that he saw entirely different set of things. For example, if he was shown a key ring, a bike, and a road, what he would see was that he was cutting vegetables, say maybe. I mean, this was not the exact thing, but yeah, this happens. So there is nothing there with our current understanding of neuroscience. There is not, to be precisely true, there is not any perfect explanation or definite explanation as to how consciousness is there.
In fact, Shivendra, there is, just don't have the correct reference for the time being. In fact, there was an experiment. There is an experiment in the sense that somebody's brain actually certain parts of the brain actually completely damaged. And they discover,
that was basically the Phineas gauge. That's where it all started, the Legion.
They discover that the remainder part of the brain now started functioning in a way as if the other parts actually are alive, but that's not really alive. That part of the brain is damaged. And suddenly brain is responding in a way which the scientists finding it very intriguing as to how is somebody doing things when that part of the brain, according to us, is supposed to do X, is damaged. Now that's the puzzle. That's actually poses a question.
That's actually called the scientific term for it is neuroplasticity. Even if your brain is damaged, I mean, how that electrical, if that electrical activity actually manifests into what you do, that will change as was seen in Phineas Gage lesion studies. But your brain, even then, with the lack or the poverty of that brain structure, it still tries to weave this whole thing. And that is basically I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the concept of neuroplasticity.
But for our students, I wanted to say this is an example how physicalism that we do in the class, that really everything is connected to a state in the brain, is actually not necessarily correct. Or in the sense to say that if X is corresponding to something in the brain is not necessarily true. These are examples to show that certain kind of physicalism has its own problem, because that's the mind-body problem. I'm just talking to students, not to you, Shivendra. So I'm not interested in going for our students, not the technical side of it, but the issues side of it, in the sense that what it is called is one issue, but another thing is what really it says. So that's what it really is telling us, that look, and that's one of the reasons why John Searle's Chinese room experiment tells you, or the Tesla, for example, you find the car is actually automatically driving, and John Searle says it's absurd. It is not really, there's a difference between Tesla car driving and a driver driving, me driving or you driving. And that's, so therefore, artificial intelligence has algorithm to do n number of things. You can really make it very complex. You can make it extraordinarily powerful, competent. But John Saul would say it still doesn't have consciousness. That's the issue. So there is something about consciousness that is not entirely captured by. So therefore, when people say, will computer have consciousness? John Saul would say, at this point in time, all that is not sign of consciousness. It is the efficiency of algorithms and our mastery over that. That's the kind of stuff that that again would help us and our students to understand that there is something different about consciousness which is not reducible to what we think as sign of consciousnse. I'm not saying if I'm putting it out, but anyway, we have some hands up.
Yeah. I think Professor Pandey has a question, right? Vikash. Yeah, and then we can go to Samrat. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Sven. Really good talk. So I'm a physicist at Kriya, and I did my master's from BHU. So we have a connection. Okay.
Yeah.
So you talked about consciousness and its properties according to Indian philosophy, right? But does Indian philosophy says anything about the origin of the consciousness?
This is your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, the Advait Vedantin would say, there is not just one philosophical system in our Indian base. There are actually 6 orthodox schools and various other schools. So, Advait Vedantin would say that consciousness is all there was, all there will be, and all there is. But on the other hand, you have the physicalist like Charvak, who would say that, well, consciousness is an adventitious property. And he gives this famous analogy that if you have a betel leaf, you add some lime and some katha to it, it's just like that. All those physicality of your body, that somehow causes your consciousness to emerge, which I don't think is a very good explanation, because that again is magical, because we are not allowed to have this kind of emergence. Emergence is in no sense a good physical explanation, because it somehow takes this magical leap from these whole substances.
I have a serious objection to that. There are many top-notch physicists who are working on this field about trying to explain consciousness. Max Tegmark, Swedish physicist, is one of those.
Yeah, he's in MIT.
Yeah. So, and my own research is on complexity of things and the emergence of power law behaviors, where there is memory in time. So I personally feel that consciousness is very much a byproduct of the interaction between the maybe the mind and the body. Maybe the brain facilitates that interfacing, because as you mentioned in one of your slides, that body is a physical thing, mind is a non-physical thing, but they still do talk to each other. And it's not one way, it's a two-way street. So there must be at some place where that interfacing is happening. Maybe brain is that place, I don't know on that. But I have a strong feeling that whether you go and you read Chinese or Western philosophy, or whether you go to Indian philosophy, it does not tell you about the origin of the consciousness. And I feel that physicists who are working on this topic of consciousness being an emergent property, where some basic set of rules, when they repeat over and over again, it could give rise to consciousness. I have a strong, I may be a little bit biased because it comes from a physicist's point of view. So
okay.
What's your take on that?
Because for the benefit of students, would you just explain what is an emergent property?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe actually I have, if you allow me, is it okay if I can share my screen? Is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible. You can share your screen.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple of days ago, I was invited at Garhwal Central University to give a talk. Okay. And let me bring my slide over here. Share screen. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's play a game over here. Okay. So, and to play this game, you need a dice that comes with a game of Ludo, a scale, preferably a 30-centimeter one, and a pen or a pencil. So on a big piece of paper, I have put 3 dots, okay? And these 3 dots, they correspond to the 3 vertices of the equilateral triangle. And I have labeled them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could label them in any order, it does not matter. But the numbers denote the number of dots that you see on the face of a dice. Now I have to populate this place, okay? This surface that is enclosed by the 3 vertices. And since we don't have any point over here, I have put n equal to 0. Now I have to put the first point. The first point has to be random, okay? So we don't apply the rules of the game in the first point. So I could have picked a point over here. I could have picked a point over here. I could have picked a point over here. But I chose here just random, okay? So this is the first point, and this is n equal to 1. The first point is ready. Now to get all the subsequent points, I need to play the game. So what I do, I roll the dice. Now when I roll the dice, it could come up with 6 possibilities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now just for an illustration, suppose the number 4 shows up, okay? So what I do, from the very first point, I measure the distance to the vertex that is labeled as 4, and I find the midpoint along that distance, okay? So here we come. So this is the point. This is my second point now. Now again, I again roll the dice, and suppose now the number that shows up is 1. So from the second point, I again measure the distance to the vertex that is labeled as 1, and my third point is halfway between that. Now imagine if I do it, say 1,000, 2,000 times, will a structure come out from this? Now this looks a very random game, but it has got very, very simple rules. And now I'm going to show you the simulation result. So I ran it on MATLAB. Okay, let me just increase the resolution. I often have to do that so that I save data. Okay. Now you could start to see that, okay, some sort of geometrical shape or structure is coming out. And try to think that if you can really predict this. So there are certain points where your point will never fall, and there are certain points where it will keep on repeating. So this is deterministic. So deterministic in a sense that even if I had taken a very different starting point, I would still end up with the same structure. So it is deterministic, but you can't predict it. So this is called chaos. It's one of the branches in physics as well as in mathematics. So now you see that a shape is coming out, and it has got some really interesting properties. Let me show you. So for example, so after running it for say 1 million points, this is what I come up with. And if I take any of this triangle, and if I zoom it to 4 times, and again I take up and again zoom it to 16 times, and so on to 256 times, the same structure is repeated at different scales. So it's scale independent self-similarity. And this is deterministic, but can't be predicted. So this is an emergent behavior.
Yeah, because if you stop sharing, I think, this is very interesting what you're saying. I mean, if I'm not a physicist, then
I have some answers about it.
Yeah. I mean, what is an emergent? Because philosophers use it, social scientists use it. There's an emergent property, and I think Shivendra can go ahead. Then Kalpita and Sumitra, there are some hands there.
Some student has questions.
Yeah.
Just give me 2 or 3 minutes. I'll try to explain this. What you did was it was actually run by similar sort of thing was done by Wolfram He's a cognitive scientist from MIT, and when he started that project Wolfram, it was this particular thing. Now you have this new wave of cognitive scientists, particularly Donald Hoffman, who believe that consciousness is somehow fundamental, and even that it's non-physical. It's not that it's physical, and that consensus is among all philosophers or all scientists. And that is basically, look at this Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff's theory. So again, Max Tegmark has put his objections. So Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, they say that there is some quantum processing going inside the nanoscale microtubules. And the objection against that is by Tegmark that, well, it's decoherence and that cannot happen. And also the time scale of the quantum processes and in the classical processes. So the word is not definitive.
Yes,
again,
So
can we take some questions from the students, and then we can come around to that question. I think we have some question from Sambhavi and I can see. Let them. We can return to some of these questions later.
Sambhavi,
yeah.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shambhavi. I'm a student. The talk was really great. I learned a lot. My question is about what are the implications of, recent several years of neuroscience study on like non-human beings, like animals and animals' consciousness, as well as like recent research about plant intelligence. So what is the implications of that on the philosophy of consciousness? And for example, mind-body dualism and stuff. And I also wanted to bring up the fact that even though it may not be in the Western philosophy canon, there have been several, like folk philosophies or stuff from various indigenous groups that are acknowledging the role of animals in ecosystems and having these really robust environmental philosophies. So I wanted to know your comment on how these can be threaded together. So yeah, that was my general.
Shambhavi, can you please formulate it in 1 or 2 lines so that your question is precise?
Okay. A precise question would be, what are the implications for philosophy of mind-body dualism and consciousness based on...
From animal studies point of view.
Yeah.
So one kind of work that is being done is, say in bees, our human brain has vast complexity. I mean, 10 to the power 11 neurons with 10 to the power 18 synaptic connections. And that with present system is virtually impossible to do. So what we are doing actually, what as scientists, they are doing actually is trying to map the brain of these smaller creatures. So that's one line of work. Apart from this, though we don't have a definitive answer neither from the scientific side or the philosophical side, I have tried to show that how this dichotomy can be used for our practical purposes. And your second question was?
No, I think it's not. Yeah, not second question. Means she was trying to understand how the animal consciousness studies.
Also there is a lot of evolutionary studies going on where we try to look at the simplest form of organisms like amoeba, and we can posit a question here there that is it sensible to ask that does amoeba have free will? Or even look at plant studies. The plants, they perform the most complex of computation in their leaves, but a scientist would not give that plant a plant has the property of consciousness. A physicalist would not give that plant. So there's this line of work, and you can look at Anirban Bandyopadhyay's work if you want later. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I may also add one line to Sambhavi's kind of question, answering Sambhavi's question, much of the brain neurological research, as far as I know, there of course there's some are happening on the humans. A large majority of the research actually is done with the help of the animals. Mm-hmm. So there is so therefore Sambhavi, the neuroscience work, I may be wrong. This is what my readings here and there tells me, that much of the lab research is actually done on animals. and on the, of course, human brains when they're damaged, and there's other kinds of possibilities where people are doing something. Am I right, Shivendra, on that?
Yes, the biggest neuroscientific discovery of the last century, and it actually came in 1995, I guess, for the discovery of neurons, and it was basically when we looked at a monkey. Similar set of neurons fired in his brain as it fired in the other monkey's brain. Though that has not been able to give a complete account of how do we have empathy. And well, a physicalist would say that that explains empathy, and physicalism is all there is. But you have explanation while trying to explain serial offenders. They say that, well, they can turn on and off their empathy. So that means I can turn on and off my neurons. I mean, will physicalists give me this? I hope not.
Okay, I think we are going over time. So, if any student has any last question for the speaker, we can take that. Otherwise, we can formally close it.
Kalpita, I just
it's perfectly fine. I mean, these are the guys who have to come with answers.
Yeah.
Kalpita, can I just say one thing for the benefit?
Sure. Yeah.
Much of the, this is because we're doing in the class, much of the neuroscience research, Sambhavi and others are really producing a kind of map of correlations at best. They may be using different language. I'm a layperson who is looking at it from outside. And so that research is actually feeding, it can give examples to a lot of people who are physicalists, who think that this is what the all material thing, it's a brain, we don't know now, but we'll eventually know. We can really map it. And we, like genetic materials, we'll know exactly what it is. And we just simply, at this point in time, we don't know. So a lot of these things are fueled by this kind of scientific research. But on the other hand, people who are thinking of consciousness, something not exactly correlation, but something more, something different, there's still questions remain at what does it mean to be happy, to be unhappy, to be sad, to be satisfied, to feel a sense of wonder. It is something that you can do a brain and press it and suddenly you feel a sense of wonder, mystery. These kind of questions people are, but that's the kind of thing I will answer. Finally, in the question of emergent thing, in terms of social science, but largely drawn from philosophy, the idea is simple, that there are elements that are having properties. But emergent thing is something that particular thing doesn't have the property. It's only over a period of time through interaction, certain things emerge. And we call it as an emergent because it is not reducible to one available property in a single thing. But over a period of time through interaction, something produces, something comes up. That's why it's called emergent. That will be kind of a kind of simplistic way of putting it for the benefit of the students. And I'm sorry.
There's one more hand raised, I can see.
Divya.
Yeah, Divya has a question, and there is a question from Shreya in the chat box. So maybe Divya first, and then we can take Shreya's question. Divya?
So hi all, I'm Divya. So I just thought of a question, like a curious fact, like can mind exist without a body?
Mhm.
I've read about it somewhere before, but would like to hear more about it.
Well, the dualist position is basically that, well, yes, it exists apart from the body. And also the Advait Vedanta or those people, those kind of people who believe that consciousness is fundamental and there is all, consciousness is all there is. So they would basically say that, well, it can exist. And so those are the theories. But the problem is that, for example, the Advait Vedanta, the hard problem of consciousness as we know it, Advait Vedanta too has a hard problem, and it's called avidya. You can look it up in Routledge History of Indian Philosophy, with this edited by P. Bilomoria, and this, I think, 23rd or 24th paper was by Stephen Kaplan, and he mentions that this is hard. Avidya is a hard problem. Now it's very easy said, but very hard to do it. How will you try to develop a verifiable model of avidya? I mean, no one has been able to do it. And these are the actual practical challenges that lie. So yeah, that's there is. And also about this, what Vikas was saying, how does consciousness emerge? To ask this, that consciousness emerge, you have this fundamental concept in your mind that consciousness has to be somehow emerged, and this leads to the philosophical fallacy of infinite regress. And this was what happened during Newton's time. Well, philosophers like Aristotle were trying to ask that who is the first mover, and by Newton, he said that we do not need to know who is the first mover. Let's drop that question, leave it for the philosophers. That question still stays, but what he said was that let's believe for a moment that everything is in motion. And with that, you have Newton's 3 laws of motion, which were, and you know the whole history of it, and Einstein and all those debate. So yeah, that's you can look at that line of work, Divya.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Shreya's question is
Shreya's question, yeah.
I'm trying to find that actually. No. Okay. So what she's asking is that if we take a solipsism standpoint, then under that approach, why would the brain create pain and suffering that harms the body? If we take a solipsist idea of.
I don't have any clue. I don't have a definite word about it. But I guess that's Maya. Because even in Advaita Vedanta, it's not just one set of ideology. Even in Advaita Vedanta, you have two Bhamati Prasthan and you have the Vibran Prasthan. One of them believes in Ek Jeeva, that it's just one Jeev out there, and other set believes in so all this is Maya. And the philosophical explanation of this, as Indian systems would give it, is basically because you have desire, and not all those desires can be fulfilled, and that not fulfilling of a particular desire that leads to some kind of anguish or pain or all this in the body. There have been some scientific philosophical explanations too about it, but I'm not particularly happy with it, and this still remains a question. And also that how do we know other minds? There is still no final word even in philosophy about it. The scientists have tried to show this thing with mirror neurons, that's how we know the other minds. Like, I know how that when you feel sad, just by looking at your face, I know that you are sad, but still it's not the final word.
Yeah. Joel, please.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I just had like two questions. Firstly, so we know that there is something called dissociative identity disorder, where people have different personality types. So, and I've heard certain cases which are very surprising. Like, I have a reference for one of these cases. Like, there was a girl who was blind. She went blind, but through her therapy, what they found out was that some of her personalities could see. I've heard two more cases which are equally surprising, but I really don't have a reference for this. Maybe some of you all might have heard. There was one case of a similar person a different person having split personality, and that person had diabetes in some of the personalities. Basically, the insulin level wasn't changing. Then there was another case where a person with split personality, some of his personalities had a change in their eye color. So this is like very surprising, right? Like, how is it
change in
eye color? Eye color.
Okay. Eye color.
Some things are like understandable. Like, a person is speaking in a different accent in some of the personality type, that makes sense. But when there are physical changes, like a person having diabetes or cannot see, or I don't know, change. So these are things which I really surprise me, and I really wonder, like, what kind of philosophy of mind theory could explain it. So that's one question. Secondly, I see that a part of your philosophical thesis involves where you try to bring in the Indian philosophical models. But we know that there is a clear distinction in itself. I mean, there's a debate within the Indian philosophical tradition. Like, the Buddhists will not agree with the Advaitins, and the Advaitins will actually disagree with the Sankhya as well. So how would we go about with this? Like, are we just trying to select? Like, what is the approach here? That's what I would like to know.
Regarding your first set of questions where you discussed this identity dissociative identity disorder, and the one I mentioned, split brain disorder. You can look at the works of Roger Sperry. He got a Nobel Prize for it, and that is the actual reason why we haven't completely discarded any. We at least say so that we have disregarded them in the philosophical domain, but behaviorism, it's still there. Functionalism, it's still there. Physicalism, it's still there. And why are they there? Because they have wonderful tools. I mean, at one point you had to subdue a so-called insane person. You had to subdue, or you had to go for heinous procedures like lobotomy, and then pharmacology come in. And now the current trend is having therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy. So none of those physicalist theories have even been dropped. As far as what philosophy of mind can say about it, there are some works about it that try to explain. And one of those works is by, I guess, Daniel Dennett, who says that if your mind is just trying to weave a story, taking all the inputs from all your sensory modalities, it posits forward a 400 millisecond frame of reality. And that frame of reality, that 400 millisecond, that is all, that whole story, like just you see in a movie, frame by frame, that is all there is to a theory. And as far as, and some kind of similar position, even the Buddhists have. But again, there are objections against Buddhist, and there is this whole Khandan Mandan, what we call it, idea. And that is why I didn't try to just show you a single viewpoint. For example, the Advait Vedantin, I could have just shown you the Advait Vedantin view side and leave the rest. I also try to show the Purvamimamsa or the Nyaya model, though they have completely, vastly, categorically different systems. But that's why I think we need to work in tandem. I mean, there are some better explanations in a particular theory. There are some better explanations in another theory. And that's why we need to test out many ideas. And as I said, maybe amongst 1,000 ideas, a single one might work. But the thing is, we all have to work in tandem. This whole dichotomy, there may be a mind-body dichotomy, but we do not need to have the dichotomy of this scientist side and philosopher side, that, oh, I'm a scientist, I want to talk to a humanities guy. And I think that's the point of this School of Interwoven Arts and Sciences. So, yeah, there are not exactly many definite answers.
In fact, Daniel Dennett kind of approach could even sort of explain somebody, seeing, you were saying, Joel, that vision, that different persona or different, the psychological persona seeing different things. Somebody blind being able to see if the brain is generating a lot of what is construed as vision of objective reality. I mean, may not be paraphrasing very well, but that there is a function in the brain that actually generates what we think to be objective reality, then it's possible that somebody with a split mind or a split brain, that even a blind person could produce experience of vision.
Let me just share one more anecdote.
That makes sense.
But I don't know about diabetes. That's a bit of that's difficult.
If you allow me, let me just share one more anecdote, Joel. There's this another experiment. Your visual system, it's not just one system. There are various visual systems involved, like V1, V4 going to, I think, 56 or something like that. That's the number V1, V2, V3 to 56. And all those V1, V2, they process a different part of this visual thing. Like some part will process the physical features or the spatial features. Some will detect color, or some will detect another part of that visual. But there is experimental evidence, like if you do a transcranial magnetic stimulation to the V4 area, this side of color, you won't have any color on that side. So there is fair amount of experimental evidence. And even for a philosopher, this should make the problem interesting, that why is it that your phenomenal experience has to be correlated? It's not identical, but why does it have to be correlated with any brain activity? Why is it so? So this makes the problem interesting even for the philosophers. And this Daniel Dennett, he favors, I guess, last I heard him was he favors this global workspace theory by Bass, which was given in, I think, 70s by Bernard Bass. He had this global workspace theory book. And that's the theory he favors. So he basically says that, well, there's a lot of unconscious processing going, and they both have this, though they use it differently, but they do both draw upon this analogy of theater. So this unconscious has a vast capacity. Your conscious thing, it has very little capacity. And he draws this analogy of light, that your attention, whatever you put your attention on, like the light on a theater, that is what your conscious mind is, and that is every 400 milliseconds. Along with that, you can have a look at Libet's work, which actually tried to disprove free will. Benjamin Libet. It was in the 70s. Same kind of work was replicated by Christoph Koch and this Giulio Tononi. So that says.
Okay, I think,
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a great, along with your talk, what you have given us is a great list of reading, and we can explore different domains.
In fact,
it's very hard actually to, I mean, I have literally in many sense diluted the topic, and because, well, it was very challenging for me to cover it in a 40-minute slot.
Sure.
So I'm sorry for that. But
no, not at all. You have given a very, very, very good understanding of the debate, basically. Yes.
Those references are just for the students, because if they have time, they can go and have a look and see the kind of research for themselves, that what is actually the whole other parts of the world doing, what are other people doing, and maybe learn from it.
Yeah.
I mean, they as young students, they don't have to need an ideology. They need to explore ideas rather than having a stagnant ideology that they want to carry to the rest of their life. It's their time to explore, I guess.
Sure. Thank you. I think, thank you for spending time with us and giving us so much nitty-gritty about this topic and understanding. I will really look forward to your own thesis and what you are coming up with. And perhaps after you submit, there will be again one chance, one opportunity for us to learn more about your thesis and your contribution in this journey. And thank you. Sumitra, would you like to?
Yeah, no, thank you. This was productive, very, very stimulating. And also, it helps. It also tells us with what level of detail one has to pursue questions. Now, of course, in an undergraduate class, or even for any of us, it's not possible to engage with that level of attention and detail. But in order to actually do work in mind-body dualism, or all that talks about mind, body, and consciousness, it gives us a really good sense of the terrain. You really gave us a wonderful, glimpse of the terrain. For that, it was really nice to have this talk.
There's just one more thing I would like to say. Before I think it's time to depart. I think that's going to be the word. But anyways, in this chat box, I have just put a poster where it includes a feedback form. So you guys can have a look at it and please submit your feedback about the talk. That helps me know about how you liked it or where I can improve. So
I think a lot of students have written to you directly saying that they have learned a lot from your presentation. Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.